Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversations together. My name is Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And it's time. I'm so tired.
Y'all, it's been a tiring fall.
It has.
Yes, I'm tired. I'm ready for some nighttime stories that are gonna make me fall into a deep slumber and not at all keep me up at night because I'm freaked out.
Mm-hmm. Well, then this is not the game for you.
What? Jacques.
No, I am ready for fall. I have to say it's been really nice to walk around and see all the leaves changing color and I don't know, just have that crisp chill in the air. There's something about it that feels like personally rejuvenating, but I'm also just so sleepy. I've been telling everyone, even at work, I'm like, I feel like I'm a bear about to go into hibernation because my body just wants to sleep. Like, I don't know what it is. It's the seasons changing. I just need rest right now.
I was at the coast this weekend taking some friends that were in town to different fun beach locations on the Oregon coast. And we found this brewery to go to, and I was like, oh, we should go there for sunset. It's like on the beach. We can watch the sun go down.
Yeah.
It was actually a clear day in October in Oregon, so shocking. And literally we were checking what time the sun went down, and it was like before 7, and I was like, oh boy, that explains a lot. Like, for me, it's like when the sun starts going down that early, it's just brutal.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so envious you got to go to the beach, though. I've been wanting to go to the coast for a while because something about the ocean just does make me, I don't know. I need to go see the ocean at least like once every couple of months, I feel like.
Yeah.
Something about it's just so nice.
Yeah, it was nice. It was really pleasant and not very busy because I don't think anybody expected it to be a sunny weekend. So really enjoyed it. Leaning into my fall life. We hit the orchards this weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's so nice.
We hit the mountain. We got some hot cocoa at
You
the
did
lodge.
all the touristy, like, fall things. That's amazing.
100% of them in like a 2-day span.
Aw. And Rosie, for video listeners or video watchers, you may see Rosie peeking in. Yeah, but, fall, going outside, very good. I think that was actually in last week's newsletter as well, where Rosie's just causing a kerfuffle. 1 second.
A kitfuffle.
Let me just get her. Okay, Rosie.
But she's so perfect, everyone.
She is. She can do no wrong, even when she's causing a ruckus.
She sent me a long text message today. It was really heartfelt.
She did. Rosie sat on my phone and sent Joel a text message.
Yes, it was very sweet. It was great hearing from you in the middle of my workday.
But yeah, I think what's really nice about fall is video game time. In theory, this is when we can stay inside and also play some video games. And last week we announced Bramble
The Mountain King
as our monthly game selection, and it's been really cool seeing everyone talk about what they're excited for. Quite a few folks said this was on their wish list and they're really pumped to have an excuse to play it. So yeah, it's going to be really nice. Today we're going to be talking a bit more about the first section of Bramble. For those of you who may be new to the podcast, to the newsletter, to the club, welcome. If you go to geeksandgrounds.com, you can learn all about how the club is run. You can sign up for the newsletter, and that's where you get all of the questions and things that help you sort of go through the game with us together as a community. Again, that's geeksandgrounds.com. And if you're a returning member, I am just wrestling with this cat in my lap right now. If you're a returning member, please consider leaving us a review or rating us or a comment, whatever the platform that you are engaging us with. Whatever they like the most, please do that, as it helps us reach more ears and eyes and get more people talking about these really cool games.
Yes, and I also learned a lot about New Zealand's process for bringing over mature games into their ecosystem. It was a very educational week for me on Discord.
Yeah.
So hop in there and learn more about New Zealand and how they deal with mature games.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It's funny because I didn't even think about it, but I actually did know some of that information because I worked on Scorn, which is a mature game as well. And I totally blanked on that because it is such a specific piece of knowledge. Before we get into the game, though, what we like to do is ease on into conversation, catch up with what we've been doing outside of playing the game of the month. And so that's where we head to the pastry case.
To the pastry case, we're going down the street to get some pastries.
Bow, dow, dow.
We need a new audio stinger every time we go to the pastry case.
Well, we don't need the stinger. We just need us.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're sitting here sipping on I got a little vanilla latte.
Yeah, and you got me what? Lavender?
Lavender honey.
Lavender honey.
Lavender honey.
Yeah, so we've got our coffee ready to go. Hopefully you're drinking something cozy, warm, filling, all the good stuff. Mm-hmm. But Pastry Case, again, is a chance for us to share what we've been watching, reading, playing, and engaging with outside of the game of the month. What have you been up to, Joel?
What have I been up to? I was introduced to a show from the year 2018 called Catastrophe on Prime. It's a Rob Delaney joint. Comedy about a 40-year-old that accidentally impregnates a one week stand person while traveling abroad in the UK, comes back to the States and learns that she's pregnant, and so it's them trying to figure out and build a life together. I have not laughed out loud so much at a sitcom in years. It's just cracks me up. It's the perfect combination of awkward tension with humorous line delivery and circumstances. So far I'm about halfway through the first season. If you missed this like I did, I would absolutely recommend it. It's been really fun.
I have never heard of this, so I will be watching this once I'm done with my current watches.
What are you into?
I have been watching some Fionna and Cake, which has been wonderful. For folks who aren't familiar with Fionna and Cake, it's essentially a spin-off, I guess, or extension in the multiverse of Adventure Time. So Adventure Time is a show came out a long time ago. I don't even remember when. And it's probably one of the best animated series that if you are looking for something good to watch that is just so heartwarming, but can be so it'll hit you to your core in some of the episodes, Adventure Time is it. And Fionna and Cake is continuing with that trend. Fionna and Cake in the Adventure Time universe is actually a fan fiction version.
Oh, that's right. It's like the Ice King.
The Ice King creates fan fiction of Finn and Jake, who are the two protagonists, I guess, that you meet in Adventure Time.
Yeah.
And instead of Finn and Jake, he made Fionna and Cake. And this show is based on Fionna and Cake.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is it done as fanfic still, or is it this is just their world now and we're living in it?
Is it too much of a spoiler to maybe?
It might
I
be
think
a spoiler.
it might.
It's
it might
a new
be a
show.
little bit of a spoiler.
Okay.
It is brand new. It's on. It's called Max now instead of HBO, but it's on Max. And I highly recommend if you want to subscribe for 1 month, watch the show and unsubscribe. I would highly recommend it. And if you also want to stay subscribed, I guess, for legal reasons, maybe. I don't know what you can stay subscribed, but I would say definitely worth a watch. I'm not quite done. I think all of the episodes are out. It's meant to be a mini series.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking, at least.Maybe I'm wrong. I'm only on episode 7, so I feel like we're reaching the end of an arc. So we'll see.
All right.
And I'm very excited because oh my gosh, Our Flag Means Death. Season 2 is going to be coming out, or is out.
Is it out?
I don't know. Someone was telling me.
For this one.
Yeah, someone was telling me. I think that it's either coming out this week or coming out next week. So I really hope that they're right and they weren't lying to me, because I'm very excited for that.
I should say I also finished the Ahsoka season finale last night. This new Star Wars series. It is one of the most fun experiences I've had with Star Wars, maybe since I was a kid.
Okay.
Some of the other shows have really, really done it for me. That I've thought they were really enjoyable, but this is the one that there's a sense of fun and wonder that I haven't felt in
Oh,
a long
that's
time with
nice.
it. So if you're a Star Wars person, I would give it a run.
Yeah, that's really cool. Would you recommend it for people who don't know anything about Star Wars as an entry point?
So I never watched the Rebels series, which this is like a continuation of, and so I have done some TikTok diving to try and
Got it.
who is this character? What are these whales that fly in space? Like what is happening here? I think they do a good enough job telling a self-contained story, but there is very obviously history with a lot of the characters, including
Okay.
the antagonist.
Yeah.
And that if you haven't done at least a little bit of cursory, I think you're missing out on
Yeah.
some backstory there.
Okay, that's good to know. Last thing before we maybe switch gears. I finished the show Sex Education.
This show.
Sex Education is something that everyone should watch. If you don't want to get a Netflix account, find someone with a Netflix account, use it. It is so good. It's 4 seasons long. When it ended honestly at, I feel like, the right time. The way that they ended it, it just felt so good, and you can see the stories of the characters and how they could potentially unravel, or not unravel, unfold in the future, but they don't like kind of sort of beat it home in a way that feels too cheesy or too weird, you know? And the characters are amazing. The way the show addresses like sex and gender and body issues and everything around being human. It's just so good. And it did some things, especially in the last season, that I was like the whole time questioning, especially the relationship between Otis and his best friend Eric. There was a lot in there where I was like, they talk a lot about like sex and friendship and relationships, but like they never talk about race. And I thought that was really interesting. And like, slight spoiler, but I do think it's worth noting because it was a thing that annoyed me a lot with the first seasons. They do actually approach some of these other conversations that are really tough in ways that I thought were really realistic and in kind of a best imagined sense of the world of like how friends can negotiate and like navigate those conversations. I thought it was a really good model, honestly.
That's awesome.
I really encourage people to watch it.
I do remember in season 3, so I haven't watched the most recent season. And I
Yes.
think in season 3 you get like a 1 episode arc where Eric is dealing with kind of the religious and was he Nigerian in the
Yes,
show?
yeah.
Both like the religious and Nigerian parts of his identity and how they intersect with his homosexuality. And it's like
Yeah.
it's so well done. Like I learned so much from that show in the first 3 seasons that I was just like, wow, like in terms of like building empathy, which is something we talk about on this show a lot, it is incredible in terms of like how it deals with this. And again, like coming from a cis white straight person, like for me, it really helped me see and get grounded in some of these stories. If you come from those perspectives, I don't know how that would resonate. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you guys have watched it, throw it in the comments. I'm super interested. But now I got to get into season 4.
It's so good. I was happy it ended where it did. Again, did I want it to go further? Yes, because I just love the characters so much and I love the world so much. But I'm happy that the showrunners, they were like, no, this is where we want the story to end. And I think it was a really great decision on their part. So highly encourage everyone to watch it. I binged the whole thing in like 2 weeks. It was
Heck yeah.
so good.
Oh, that's wonderful. What about games? You playing any other fun games besides Bramble the Mountain King?
Yes, I have started Sea of Stars. Actually started and continued beyond the tutorial area because I've played that area too many times. It's incredible. I cannot wait to play more. We've had some really good time streaming it the last couple of weeks, and yeah, it's just hitting all of the boxes that I want in terms of nostalgia, and being a hopeful JRPG. So many JRPGs right now are really grim and dark, and they want to be edgy, which I'm like, that's fine. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that, but I've been wanting more like of a joyful experience, even within heavy themes, having this like joyful framework that it's embedded within, and it's definitely that. It's incredible. So I highly recommend playing if you are at all into RPGs.
Every time I'm on Steam, I like you and one of my other best friends are playing this game, and so I'm just like, do I need to abandon ship on Baldur's Gate 3? Do I need to abandon ship on Mineko and hop into Sea of Stars? Is this the zeitgeist right now?
Yeah, I don't, well, it very much, I mean, when it launched, I will say a lot of people had some very, very glowing things to say, and it's definitely worth playing. I appreciate that folks who I've talked to say you can finish it in about 50-60 hours, which for an RPG is really good.
That is really
it's like
RPG,
a really, really nice, compact story. You could even finish it in shorter time if you are a fast player. I'm not, so I'm not even going to really toy with that.
You are not at all.
But yeah, it's been incredible. And then I've been finishing up Mineko's Night Market. I love the story in this game. I love the way that the story has evolved. I think, again, I think this is going to have to be something we talk about more in the future. It's got a lot there, and I think people who've played maybe only the first season and maybe hop off, they've missed a lot of what I think makes the game truly special.
Oh, okay.
I will say though, I don't blame people who are hopping off, because it is pretty rough around the edges when you play, especially on the Switch.
Yeah, Lee was telling me that she's getting a number of kind of buggy experiences in the first season. So, yeah, I get that. But God, it is so freaking cute, and you chasing cats around and collecting fur balls. It's just like, there is definitely something very satisfying about it that I'm really digging.
Yeah, I like the repetition. I think one of the feedback that I've seen other people say is, oh, this like too basic of gameplay. It's too repetitive. I'm like, I go into these kind of games for some of that repetition. I do understand some of the balancing. What's really interesting is they haven't patched it on the Switch. So I've noticed Switch players coming in and telling me like, oh, this is still not fixed yet. But they have patched it on Steam Deck and on Steam, where the resource number needed, or like the money needed to buy different craft benches or tools, is significantly higher on the Switch and in the original version than it is right now on the Steam.
Get your Mineko sale on in Steam.
Yeah, so originally, because I remember there was like, in the game you can buy different tools and different art benches, and there was one bench for like pottery or something that was like 3,600, which in that game takes so long to make. Like, making money does not come very easily, at least to me. I have not cracked the code on what the best things to sell are. But, oh my gosh, I was like, if I have to make 3,600 to buy one of these things, and I have to buy like 3 or 4 more of these things,
oh, Fadofa.
I cannot do that.
Yeah.
I may not finish this game, but then they patched it, and then it was all okay.
Oh, okay.
So some of the slower loading speeds, those are all being addressed, and the devs have been pretty communicative. So I'm excited, and I think it's worth the time you put into it, because by the 3rd season, the story gets, I think, it goes really interesting places.
Interesting. I'm eager to dig in. I'm still in the first season myself.
Yeah.
So
oh, nice.
I'm still bopping around, listening to like the smooth jazz music, and just kind of crawling my way through little cat scenarios.
Yeah. Oh, cute. Yeah, that's a very, very good one.
And then so last night I couldn't sleep, and so I got up, went downstairs, and I read and finished Magic for Liars, the book. And let me just hear your keywords: dark academia, detective noir murder mystery, magic, soft magic system, hard magic system. I'm not sure. It was the thing that's so fascinating about it is the main character is like the detective who's trying to solve this mystery murder that happens at a magic school. And she is not magical. Her sister is, and her sister works at the school. And so there's a lot of interesting family dynamics that come along with that. And the thing that was so fascinating about it is, in most fantasy magic-y books, you're usually reading either like a a soft magic system or a hard magic system, which is usually defined like how clear are the rules around using magic. What is fascinating about this book is it is clear that in the universe they have a hard magic system. At the school, they're talking about theories and like all the things that inform how magic works. But the character is so ignorant about how magic works because she didn't get to go to a magic school, that from the reader's perspective it feels like a soft magic system. It feels like some things you just can't do, and I don't know why, and some things you can do, and I don't really know why that's that way either. And it was just like, wow, what a fresh take. So
that's really interesting.
Really great fall read. I enjoyed it. Would recommend.
I may have to pick that up once I got the Brandon Sanderson like Kickstarter thing. I paid the big bucks because I am a very big Brandon Sanderson fan. And so I've been reading I think it's the second book of the 4 that he wrote in secret just during the pandemic because I don't know. It's just, you just read books for fun. I was like, come on, man. Just like rest with the rest of us, please. Right. Please. Let me look up the title because I haven't said it enough to really get the whole thing. It's The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. I would say if you enjoy Hitchhiker's Guide, if you enjoy medieval England history, and if you enjoy the idea of slight, I guess there's sort of detective-y, noir-y moments in there, I think you would probably like it. It's a funny book. I think it's just been a little disappointing for me because I think the character is actually quite bland and not super likable, but not in the way that I feel engaged by not liking him. He's just kind of boring.
Gotcha.
And it's unfortunate because the rest of the world seems pretty interesting. Just the main character just seems... nah.
That's kind of like the inverse of the Tress experience, which I think we talked about a couple episodes back. We both had read that book. And that was like such an engaging character, and the narration was engaging, and the story was like fast paced and interesting. Yeah,
it's kind of a little bit of a letdown since I loved Tress so much. I was like, oh my gosh, I bet the next one's gonna blow my mind. And I did really love Hitchhiker's Guide when I read it a long time ago, and so it started strong, and then the more I've read, the more I'm kind of like, I'm sort of just going through it to get through it at this point, which is unfortunate.
Oh, that sucks.
The premise is really interesting, and I just wish that he addressed different elements of it. In this universe, you have your universe, but you can purchase basically other versions of your universe that are like downstream. So they're like variations of your universe. And as a purchaser of that parcel of universe, you can go in and become a god, And so it's the idea of like not just colonialism, like in your own universe, but there's sort of this colonialism aspect of let's go into other multiverses and imbue whatever we want onto those places.
Wow.
Super rich idea that the story just kind of like cursorily addresses, in my opinion. And so like it's weird. He talks about it explicitly, but it like doesn't have anything to do with the characters or the actual arc of the story, really. So it's kind of it just felt very weird to read.
That's a bummer.
But yeah, I don't know. If you're a Sanderson fan, I think it's like give it a try.
I think
the same thing kind of happened for me with the second trilogy of the Mistborn series. The first trilogy was great. The second is a Western-based one, and I'm like, I can't. I've tried to read that double-digit times, and it just never...
Are people wearing cowboy hats and boots? I can't get into it.
Yeah. That's kind of it.
Fair enough. I think, different horse strokes for different horse folks.
Absolutely.
As the expression goes.
Yes, the classic expression. Cool. I guess any other things you wanted to share with everyone?
Nah, I'm a boring person. I'm ready to get into some brambles.
Yeah, I want to get into Bramble too. So Again, our monthly brew is Bramble the Mountain King. If you haven't picked it up yet, you have not missed your chance. We talk about it all month. We are going to be talking about the first section of the game. It's about 1 hour of gameplay, I would say. Stopping at when the engagement with the trolls ends. So that's going to be your warning. If you haven't played, you want to save this part of the podcast or the video until you've played it, this is your warning. We're going to be getting into spoiler territory up until that section. But really quickly, we had a reflection question that we've posed to everyone in the community. I'm really curious what you have to say about just how folk tales and fairy tales have impacted you just as you've grown up and how they've shaped you.
As we all know, Joel's a lore boy who loves lore. Hashtag lore boy. I love fairy tales. Much to my parents' credit, one of the things that I could look forward to in my like elementary years and younger was my parents like telling me fairy tales and things as I was like before bed. So like you hear the story of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf, and my dad would do the voices, and whenever like he would blow, he'd like shake my chest with his fingers, and it's like I have such fond memories of story and explicitly around fairy tales. And so I think for me in my developmental years, it just really landed in the soft spot for me.
Yeah.
And to this day, anytime I get to engage with something that's like fairy tale related, folk tale related, especially like fractured folk tales and fairy tales.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, you have to lose my interest at this point because like by default, I'm kind of in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's really cool. I'm the same way. I think I grew up loving fairy tales and folk tales. As a kid, I would go to the library, and that was always, even like when I was a really tiny kid who could barely read, that's what I gravitated towards. And my mom absolutely encouraged it. We grew up with even like Disney, so I would read the fairy tales in books. My mom would get the Disney VHS, and you know, that's like what I was raised on were these fairy tales that, you know, I don't think I ever felt explicitly like it was teaching me a lesson, but at the same time, it's like that's all of our cultural sort of touchstones are from these kind of stories. And so what's really interesting is thinking about now, I feel like, and maybe it's because I'm an adult who doesn't have children, and so I'm not exposed to these kind of stories anymore through like that lens. But it's interesting to think about what kind of folk tales and fairy tales are the kids nowadays reading. Like, are they still reading Three Little Pigs or Billy Goat's Gruff? Or are they all engaging with Bluey and Star Wars? And is that their own version of these kind of like cultural knowledge transfers and like lessons learned, you know?
You have like just triggered 1,000 thoughts for me with that statement. I don't even know where to begin. Wow, that's so insightful because like culture is supposed to change and you're supposed to grow over time. Like there's nothing inherently bad if Bluey is now like that cultural touchstone, right?
Yeah.
So I read an interview with Jack White of the White Stripes. This is like 2 months ago. And I'm not a huge White Stripes fan by any means, but in high school when the song Seven Nation Army came out, the song, he was talking about how like at sports stadiums around the world, that is now like a chant that everyone gets into.
Yep.
And he's like, I bet 98% of the people doing that chant don't know that it's from my song.
Right.
And it's like, at that point, it's a folk song. Like, it's not connected to any one person anymore. He's like, I don't have a sense of ownership over it. It belongs to kind of just people.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, like, first of all, to be able to recognize that and not feel like, and maybe he does feel personally disappointed, but in this interview, the way he framed himself is like, this is almost like an achievement that like is very difficult for humans to like recognize in their lifetime. So yeah, I don't know. It's like, I think there's so many things, and I would love to just like talk about this the whole time today. Like all the ways that we see our culture evolve and adopt things. And how do you do that and still maybe honor like those moments from before?
Right. Well, and I think also because like anthropology hat on a little bit, but
Ooh.
the folk tales and fairy tales were used to also explain occurrences in the world, right? And so what's interesting more and more is now we're in worlds that don't necessarily need the same type of explaining. Like the earliest folk and fairy tales were talking about essentially, here are the powers that allow the sun to rise, and here are the creatures that basically kind of represent different diseases, and here are the things that happen when you do and behave these ways. And so they're explaining these processes in the world that now we have these much more, I guess in some ways, mundane explanations for, because we have the science for it, or we've already learned stuff, we've learned these things. And so thinking about the lore that we create now, I was thinking about Hamilton because I just am a Hamilton nerd. It's a fact about me.
So you're back. You'd say, like,
Yeah.
You said you will be back, and now you're back.
You'll see.
Okay, got
it. But what's interesting to me is we have, like, at least in America, this founding father lore that has become now folktale, and then we have these elements of like Hamilton on Broadway, which is definitely not the actual story, but it has become this sort of cultural zeitgeist where even people who don't sing Broadway musicals they know about it, and it has become part of this collective consciousness. And so I don't know, there's no point other than it's interesting to see how in lieu of explaining natural phenomenon, we have these things that now explain kind of our history lore, as well as, I don't know, still try to teach us about the world around us.
I'm canceling today's podcast. This is the podcast for the rest of the day. We're not talking about Bramble. No, I'm just kidding. Here's your vocab word of the day. In philosophy, we call these etiological myths. The myths that explain these elements of our world.
Yes.
And my parents don't like it when I refer to elements of their religious experience as etiological myths. So you be careful with how you use that word, I guess.
The word of the day comes with a caution.
With a cautionary tale, you might say.
Yeah.
So what about the representation of like the persistence, I guess? Like we've talked about how like it can change.
Right.
But like we've talked a lot, especially over the last couple of months, with like culture and like how do you connect to your roots and like diaspora experiences. So I guess I'm curious to know what you think about like how do we see folktales persisting, and what does that look like in a society where like things change so rapidly?
This is a question I've been grappling with throughout the week, because as we were thinking about how do folktales make eventually you kind of have to come to that conclusion, like, well, what then? How are they making people now? Not just us in the past. And I feel what's interesting to me is folktales originally were oral. They were told by people to one another. You tell it to your children as they're going to sleep. You tell stories around the fire. And while there's still oral traditions around the world and we still tell each other stories, more and more we're consuming our folk and fairy tales in different mediums. And so we've done so with books. We've done so with audiobooks, and now looking at the ways we consume specifically like TV shows and movies, I think are really fascinating. I'm genuinely curious to see if somehow it makes the leap, like that kind of storytelling makes the leap to short form video or like other elements of social media. Because I think seeing it in movies and TV shows makes sense.
Interesting. That is super interesting.
But all our information now is, and I wonder if kind of like looking at memes, for example, like are
memes new folktales? Weigh in the comments.
Are they like elements of folklore? I don't know. Probably. Like I'm sure there are absolutely distinctions between the two, but I think there's something interesting to be said about how we transfer knowledge, how we teach each other things, and memes are absolutely a way that we do that. And so in a way they've become lore. Like, I mean, lore in the sense of you can see a character from a meme and everyone knows the story of like Nyan Cat, which is so old. That's like the oldest.
The oldest of internet memes.
Yeah.
Gen Alpha, I know you're listening to this podcast. You're gonna have to look this up. I'm sorry.
Or like, what is it? The Fire Girl who's like, look at, it's like you have these characters that we don't know them as people. We know them as these like larger than life things that represent something else than themselves entirely at this point. So I feel like there's an element of folklore-ishness around memes. I know they're not folklore in the sense of like the traditional means, but it's in terms of transferring knowledge and culture. I think it's really interesting to think about memes and social media as that next step.
Oh, that's so good. And you use the word folklore, which of course is my favorite Taylor Swift album, specifically the Long Pond Session version of Folklore.
I did that on purpose.
Thank you.
Talk about it. Yeah.
Got to talk about James and the cardigan. Like, get in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. So yeah, I totally agree. I am curious to see how the dawn of technology and like the access and presence in our lives changes the way we engage with these stories. One of my favorite forms of media over the last maybe like 6 months, I remember talking to you about this, is Dimension 20. It's a live play D&D show. And they did a season called Never After, which is just like gruesome, broken fairy tales, folk tales. And hearing like how the characters like did their research into all the versions of these stories and like what threads were true no matter what culture was telling it versus which ones were different was fascinating. When they got to the Three Little Pigs, the DM like responded like, "I'm not letting you in, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." And I was like, wait, does everybody say that when they tell the story? Because I just thought my dad said that. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, well, what are the grains of truth and how did they persist to the point that like this show is referencing the same story in the same way at the same point of dialogue? Like, it's incredible to me.
It's awesome. Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. And what's really exciting is, I think, because both of us grew up, and I think we have more familiarity with like the Grimm's fairy tales, the Hans Christian Andersen tales, those folklore traditions. And so when we get into a game like Bramble, that comes from an entirely different storytelling realm, and I guess cultural realm. Although I think technically, I was reading this because I was trying to look up and see sort of like the family tree of how these tales evolve. And I think there's connection between like Hans Christian Andersen in particular and some of these Norse tales. Sure. Like they're all kind of connected because, again, culture is connected in so many different ways. But it's interesting because there are so many creatures. When we were playing Bramble, I was like, I have to look this up. Like, I don't know what this creature's called. I don't know what this story is. What is this reference? And so it was really exciting to see a game, and like so many of the games that we played, where I feel like I get to learn a bit more about the world because I'm like, I don't know what this is referring to, but it seems like it's really important and probably something that someone who's familiar with this folklore and folktale probably instantly is getting.
We had that with Space for the Unbound, right? With like the Blue Ox and like learning about that. Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Should we talk a bit about Bramble, the game?
Yeah, I think that was a nice little segue into it. So we're playing a game that we both don't have necessarily, like, we didn't grow up knowing these tales or hearing about these creatures. And so what's really nice is that the game does start with a little bit of a storytelling moment. There's a narrator in this game instead of having overt dialogue between characters, which I love, adding to that sort of storytelling atmosphere. But the character, and I had to type this out because I can never quite remember how to pronounce his name.
Ole?
Ule.
Ule?
Yeah. Ule.
Ule.
And Lilimor. The brother and sister, they both live in this cottage, ostensibly by the woods. But Ule wakes up and his sister's nowhere to be seen. Classic fairy tale beginning, I feel like. But what's interesting is as you walk around the room, you get to learn a little bit more. Like there's a fairy tale book. There are some toys with soldiers, which I thought was kind of interesting because in my head I was like, this is a fairy tale that won't have like present day things in it, but the soldiers and the figures are definitely like more modern, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, I did not notice that.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what it means, but I feel like that's something we'll probably have to come back to because I feel like there's a timing placement thing that I want to just figure out as we play.
Interesting.
But as Ule is walking around the room, you also see there's like a height chart, which is really cute. He's shorter than his sister, and I think it was kind of adorable because he gives this, like, he stands up on his toes and he's like trying to see if he can at least get a little taller than her.
Yeah.
So you get a sense of this sibling dynamic already a little bit. Like literally, he's trying to measure up to her in that way.
Like, mic drop moments. Well done.
And then you get to open a book and there's a story that's told.
Yeah, and you get the sense that like, okay, we're setting you up for how this game is going to play out.
Right.
That there are going to be a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there are going to be moments where as you're engaging through this world, you're going to encounter the narrator kind of stopping the action to tell you a story.
Right.
And you kind of find books and what have you. I thought that this opening story did a really nice job of introducing the central themes of the game. You begin with kind of a moralization, which is like, you should not go into the woods at night. Like, bad things can happen. You get the child that disobeys and goes out into the woods. And rather than it being, and they meet a monster or something like that, it is essentially the brambles come and take her away.
Yeah.
I think it was a her. I can't really remember now. Okay. So in terms of like just setting you up for the mechanics of the whole game in one room, the tutorial is like, so as you're engaging this room, you get these white lights that really let you experience, like, it's a way of saying, hey, there's something to explore here.
Yeah.
But while you're moving around, the way light's playing, the way shadows shift, you get kind of creepy or unsettling moments that really like keep you glued to the screen. So I think it's like in that one room, you get a sense for almost how the entire game is going to be shaking out.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're debating whether or not to play the game, you play literally the first 10 minutes and it will kind of give you a sense for, apart from the gore that comes later, am I going to be okay with this style of engagement?
Right. Yeah. It's really, I think if anyone's played any puzzle platformer, it's very much in the veins of Little Nightmares, Limbo, Inside. So games like that, which I find really nice. I don't like first-person horror. I like third-person, generally more chill horror atmospheres than anything else.
Yeah.
But as you're exploring the room, I just wanted to call out one of the touches before we actually get out into the woods. Ule looks at a painting, and this painting is a painting of like troll. It almost looks like a mass of wood or some sort of environment in the background. They're actually a bunch of trolls, and in the foreground is this woman or girl in white, like kind of collapsed in front of what looks to be a lake or a wooded glade or something. And I was looking at it and I was like, this painting is so familiar. And I ended up looking up, and it's actually a painting done by a Swedish illustrator who is famous in Sweden for creating illustrations of trolls and is like one of the most famous like fairy tale books in Sweden. So that was like a really nice reference that they put. Like, this is a fairy tale story. This is meant to take you on that storybook archetypal kind of journey.
And we will in fact be trolling you along the way.
Oh, yeah, so good.
Oh, that's unwarranted. I was saying to Jenny when I got here today, and she was describing this painting and like pulling it up and showing me, it was like, for me, I was playing it on my Steam Deck.
Right.
I looked at this painting and I could not tell what I was looking at. It was like a magic eye to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know why, because like the way she was describing it. And then she pulled up the image, and it's just like troll face, troll face, troll face, troll face, troll face. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it kind of is. If you're not like looking at a high res version of this, it actually is a bit like a magic eye. Like it could be hard to tell what's going on. And that made me feel good about myself, and you're not taking that away from me, internet.
No. Oh my gosh. And then when we get ready to go, I think there's one, or it's like a sentence or two sentences that the narrator said that I thought was really, I don't know, kind of lovely. Where she says Ule was scared of the woods, but he was more scared of not being with his sister.
Oh, that was so good.
And I thought that was such a nice little encompassing of him as a character, the relationship he has with Lillimore, and just kind of what we can expect for like what he's willing to do to brave and like to kind of face to be able to find his sister, which is really, really lovely.
I'll add one additional layer that I just think I would love for both of us in the community to be on the lookout for, which is, when is the moral wrong? Like, when is the moral actually the wrong message? And it's something that, like, when we look at the story of like Pinocchio and things like that, you start realizing actually always listening to the authority figure is not good. And maybe there are times when lying isn't like inherently just the wrong thing to do. And it's one of those things that, like, I have been trying to play this game. That was something that was discussed in the Never After show that I was talking about earlier. And so as I've been playing the game, I've been on the lookout for, when is the moral that's described actually, it might work for kids immediately, but in a larger life context, it's actually not the right moral.
And this will absolutely, in a couple of the arcs that we go through on this journey, you will definitely see that happen, that question crop up. So it's very, very good.
And this was I think this was the first one where it's like, the moral from the book that I just read was, do not go outside in the dark. But there is a larger thing, like anchor for our morality, perhaps, that is like, you don't abandon people, especially not your family. And so it's like, okay, we actually have already acknowledged that the moral of the story is not always true. And we should not just live by it because it's in a book.
Absolutely. So as we go into the woods, I love, every time I say Into the Woods, I just think of the musical. Again, I'm just Sondheim musical head. But that is such an archetypal moment of the woods represent so much in these kind of stories. Like, and so I think it's really exciting to see Ule go into the woods, be nervous and be scared, but we do see, I think, little nuggets and little foreshadowings of what's to come, which is so much fun.
Yes, you get the impression that he and maybe his sister have been creating little like pine cone people / soldiers that you kind of see in different poses around as you're walking through the woods. What's interesting is he seems so comfortable in this opening sequence. Like, yes, it's scary. Yes, it's the woods. Yes, it's night. But these are his woods.
Right.
And so like there's a confidence with the way he's moving that's like, does not match the unknown and uncertainty that you get through pretty much the whole rest of the game.
Yeah, and I think even in and what's interesting is even in the storybook, there's a line that the narrator reads where, like, initially the woods were welcoming and lovely. And we haven't, but what I thought was interesting is we haven't gotten to the welcoming part, because in the book that you get to see, like, everything's in oranges and golds, and you kind of see that later, but in this particular moment it's not. And so I think that does say a lot about how comfortable even though he has a tendency to be scared or more anxious, you're right, like, this is his space and he and his sister play here, and it's okay, like, it's a place he's comfortable in.
He has his pinecone guards.
Yeah, he's got pinecone guards. There's like a little hedgehog that like kind of runs in front of him. It was so cute. And he climbs up a cliff, and I forget, he falls, and he finds something really interesting.
Yeah, you kind of find your way into a cave.
Yeah.
And inside that cave, there's an altar. It has like a girl, and she's holding a little stone that's emitting light. And you take it, obviously. And like, my first thought was like, at this moment, these are not his woods anymore. That at this moment, we have exited the world that he knows and entered into something fantastical and surreal.
Yeah. I agree. I think what's kind of cool is you don't immediately like consciously see it. Like nothing about the setting really changed.
That's right.
But the act of picking it up and then the narrator saying like, this is the spark of hope, this is the spark of courage, and you're like, oh, okay. So something has changed, even though it's not apparent in the environment quite yet. He needs the spark of courage.
Yes.
But it seems like everything goes well because you find this magical stone that seems to float on its own. You climb up this the cliff side that seems to be something that he's familiar with again, so he's not anywhere new. And you see Lillimore. Yeah. So she's fine. She just came out to look at the view at the night.
Stargazing.
Kids do, I guess.
Yeah, apparently.
And this is where the last, I guess, major tutorial thing happens where you learn how to throw the rock.
Yeah.
Which on controller with dual stick, I am very bad at aiming.
Okay.
I found this game to be generally forgiving, but oh my gosh, the second time, because I'm playing through now with the club, I'm like, I don't remember being this bad at aiming because it took me far too long to get through that part of the tutorial.
Once I understood how to do it, I was like, okay, I got this. But it definitely was like not the intuitive like point aim shoot experience that I was expecting. It's like hold a trigger, move the thing, press a different trigger, and you are not alone. I guess this is not like Jenny's bad at shooting things. This is just like takes a minute to understand the rhythm of what's actually going on here.
Yeah, and for me, I'm just really bad at aiming with the second stick, essentially. Yeah. And it's such a juxtaposition to what I love about this game, which is they control the camera for you.
Oh,
and
yes.
so the way that the game, just like artistically, the game doesn't allow you to move the camera around really freely. They frame every shot, and so it makes it feel way more cinematic and just stunning in ways that I don't think they would have been able to achieve had they not just like controlled the camera.
You're so right. And what's funny is I meant to say like when you go up the cliff and the camera is like fixed position, the first word that came to me was cinematic. It was like, this is a cinematic moment. The framing, the picture here, it's telling a story all on its own. And I was like, this is a different approach to cinematic gaming than what I'm used to with AAA's like your Uncharted series, where it's like the cinematic moments are just short of cutscenes.
Right.
That's not what this is. This is, no, you still have like full control. You can go forward, you can go back, you can do whatever you want. But the camera is giving you your perspective.
Right.
And it's able to convey so much about the tone of the moment, where you should be putting your focus. Yeah, it's a brilliant move.
It's great. I love it. And for that reason, and we'll keep seeing this as we play, I think this game has some of the most beautiful shots I've seen in a game.
I have so many screenshots
ever.
Already.
Honestly, yeah. But as you learn how to throw the stone and knock things out of Lillimore's hands, and one final throw happens, and she has to like kind of do this sort of like dive catch, and you both end up falling sort of down off of the cliff, sliding down through what seems to be like this doorway bridge overpass thing in the brush. And you enter what is very clearly like, this is your Alice in Wonderland moment. This is your Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore moment. You're in this beautiful glade. The sun is shining, everything's golden, and you are small.
You're just a tiny guy.
Yeah. So this is where the overt like, oh, an adventure has begun.
Yes, and the welcoming of the woods.
Yes.
Right, like the golden sunlit moment. So you make your way through the glade, you jump over lily pads, and you cross fallen logs, and you jump off mushrooms. It's very cute, and it's a million screenshots.
Yeah,
and
it's beautiful.
The thing that continues to happen, though, is the second you make progress, your older sister is gone.
She just leaves you.
Which is like, to me, the moral of this story is this older sister is taking no responsibility for helping out their younger sibling.
I know. And we had, the narrator said that really explicitly, where somewhere in this section where she says like Lillimore is curious and always like looking ahead and really inquisitive and flits from thing to thing.
Yeah.
And Ule is much more contemplative and just like wants to absorb stuff and is a little bit slower because he just wants to like be present and sit with things a little bit longer.
I can't remember the exact word, but the thing that they said that led into that was like both of these children are a little obsessive or something like that, but it comes forward in different ways. And Lillimore's obsessiveness is the like she's always looking for the next thing, and Ule's is more I'm zoning in on this one thing.
Yeah.
Obsessive might not be the word that's actually used there, but it was like
it
was a great way to describe the like they both have this character trait. It's just that it manifests differently. Ugh, so
yeah.
cool.
So I think that dynamic between them where, you know, like they very clearly care for one another. They're great siblings, but because of these really kind of stark differences in personality, they navigate the world in really different ways.
Ooh, navigate. I like that.
Yeah. But as you're exploring and jumping around lily pads and seeing all these things, you start to encounter creatures and other live beings that aren't just you. The first of which are these baby gnomes.
The cutest little are they called meeple? The little like toys that like are just like they're just a body with a head.
Yeah, I think so.
Like that kids play with, like toddlers play with in the real world. That's what they kind of look like. There's just like a little blue body and a head with a very tall pointy red cap.
Yeah, you don't see their eyes because the caps are always too big, but I feel like they are this interesting mix of they're really cute, but there's something also kind of creepy about them,
Yes.
like a little bit.
Let's just start with the fact that the sound of these little baby gnomes that can walk around is this either the sound of a really talented voice actor or the actual sound of babies.
Yeah.
Like cooing and giggling and
Yes.
screeching and crying. It is it's unsettling for me.
Yeah, it was, and that's the thing. It's like, and I think that's what I loved about this section, where it was like, it was clearly a very heartwarming, cute. This is a good place right now. Like, this is a warm glade. Everything's happy, and they're welcoming you and playing games with you. You play hide and seek with them. You get to like corral some of the, I call them boys and babies, but some
Boys and babies.
but they're actually fairy, or no, I don't know, maybe like elf or fairy creatures inspired by the work of Elsa Biscow, I think is how you say it.
Okay.
But yeah, all of these creatures are like really cute and kind and fun and playful, but there's something about it where I'm like, I just still feel a little, and maybe it's because I know it's a horror game, but something about it made me feel a little bit on edge. Like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop for some reason.
Can I give you something else that put me on edge?
Yeah.
No adult supervision for these babes.
Yeah, they had the old gnome who was
one
just
old gnome
sleeping.
who's sleeping. You can't wake him up. And it's just like, there are 20 babies that are wandering around completely unsupervised. And I think they even, the narrator says something like, during the day they are out, and then at night they lock their doors or something like that.
Right, because it's rare for anyone to come into their glade that doesn't want to eat them.
That's right.
You're just like, wait, what?
And so the fact that the elder of the community is sleeping like the grandpa in Rugrats is just, it was unsettling. It was unsettling.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I like that you were actually caring about their well-being, because I was like, grandpa's sleeping, that's fine. But also, these babies just sound weird. That for me, I think it was just the audio for me.
Something is fishy.
But they seem to be generally okay. And you do walk around, you reunite one of them with the grandpa or dad, I don't know, whatever, the supervisor. So you do these sort of little quests for them, and you have a great time. But then things change.
You eventually you like open a door, you leave this little town, you help corral kids, which is gonna, like, this mechanic is gonna come into effect later, like how you can corral other moving creatures as they like move away from your character. And you continue chasing Lillimore.
Right.
Until she stands at the top of like a ledge, and behind her you see a hulking shape stand up, long lanky hair, large nose, And it snags her and tosses her in a bag.
Yep.
And then comes chasing after you.
Yeah. And this is like, the switch is flipped. The woods are no longer welcoming.
It is dark.
It's dark. Yeah, you realize, maybe you made a mistake going into the woods as the adults were told you not to go. Yeah.
Oh, I guess, do you meet the Frog King before this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like when you were jumping on lily pads.
Yes,
and all of that.
you do meet a frog king, a literal frog with a literal crown on its head that is bigger than you, and that's going to be important for later. But so basically, the rest of this chapter is just different like puzzles, platforming experiences of you survival horror. You are trying to not get captured by these large trolls.
Yeah. And so as a first encounter with something that's huge compared to you, that is clearly quite like bloodthirsty, wants to eat you, wants to eat Lillimore, and just, not good plans for you. It's really scary in a way that it's like, it's different than a jump scare. There's this sort of like darker, deeper scared feeling that I get when in these situations where it's just tense. And as a character, you don't have any weapons. You're not going to attack them. You're not going to fight back. Your only solution is to stay hidden and to try and stay out of sight so that you can get out of the area and figure out how to save your sister.
There's something in this that I think connects to like a primal sense of horror. And that is, as a kid, being chased by someone bigger than you that has bad intentions. I was thinking about this as like, actually, I'm going to connect it back to the Star Wars thing in the Kenobi series from last year, which was very nice. Like average, not amazing. There is a campy, very campy scene where a child Princess Leia, probably like 10, maybe younger, is being chased by full grown ass adults like assassin kidnappers through the woods. And it's one of those things where it's like these adults would catch her in like 15 steps in the real world, but it's campy. She's like running between trees and they dive and they can't get her. Yeah. But it's like one of those things where I was like, as a kid watching this would be the most gripping part of the episode because like it connects to that primal fear of like the big bad guy that's chasing you. And that is how I felt playing this whole sequence of the game. It's like it hit me in that primal spot and it's like, wow, I haven't had this specific fear in a very long time. Yeah. And I am feeling it right now.
It's really good. And I think what makes this really intense too, and goes into that dark, like Brothers Grimm, old school fairy tale, is that none of this hides any of the blood or the gore or the messiness that comes with these trolls. There are points where you are jumping from like box to box in a pile of like innards, essentially. And what's also really, really scary and what got me was if you do this fast, it may not happen, but did you get the like movement underneath the innards? Like there was something swimming underneath.
This was the scariest part of the whole first sequence for me.
Oh my gosh. Terrified me, because there are some points in the game, the way they designed it is that you have to jump and kind of wade through things.
Yes, it's like chest height guts to you.
Yeah, and I'm like, the guts are gross. I am more terrified of the unseen thing underneath these guts than I am of everything else around me right now.
And it's gonna suck you down, and like and you're like when you crawl out of the guts on top of a box, like the lower half of your outfit is completely red. Your hands are red. Yeah, it is truly horrific. Like you're in this moment where it's like the unseen truly is like the scariest thing. The mechanic thing that happens here, so like you jump from box to box, but it forces you to land short so that you have to wade through this guck, and this monster is like on a path, so you have to jump away when he's not close to you. There's a moment where there's one of the little troll babies. So all throughout this section, there are troll babies in cages. Gnome babies. Thank you. There are gnome babies in cages. And And this particular point, there's a little white dot and it's next to a cage and you can interact with it. And I was like, oh, this is going to knock a cage into here and I'm going to be able to walk over it. And I clicked the button like immediately, didn't even like think about what was happening. And you hear the baby crying and you realize that inside this cage is one of these gnome babies, and you get a trophy that says like sacrifice the gnome baby or something like that. And I was so mad because I was like, I didn't know I was doing that. Fortunately, I died immediately after that because I didn't realize what was happening. And then I had to replay it, and I didn't sacrifice the gnome baby the next time.
See, I did not die, and I also was like, I just need to get this thing, and like I can jump on out of here, and I did sacrifice the gnome baby, and I was just like, ugh. But in a way, it felt like there was this. It feels like it hints at sort of what Ule is willing to do to kind of get to safety, or like, and again, it goes back to the question of, what does facing your fears look like? What does bravery look like in these kind of situations? And depending on how you play, it's different because you don't have to make that choice and you don't have to stick with it. And so I think that was just an interesting moment of how I played it, kind of started developing Ule into this character of like, he was so afraid he was willing to do anything to get out of it.
Interesting.
So.
I love characterizing like metagaming. That's one of my favorite things.
Me too.
I believe it's right after this that you meet your only real friend in this game.
Yeah?
Yeah, the stone giant.
I'll let you. Well, because I've played it,
okay.
so I will neither confirm nor deny.
I'm pretty sure it's right after this. You encounter something that at first blush you think is another troll, but is actually a stone giant, and there's a distinction there, and I'm not really sure what it is or how it is, but there are all these little pinecone soldiers on top of him, and you have to like throw rocks to get them off, and once you do, you get a little narration about how this stone giant doesn't have any friends, and you are now their only friend.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, so I've been reading a lot of just Norse folklore, folk tales, trying to get familiar with it. Again, this is all from the internet, so take it all with a grain of salt, because I've tried to verify, but who knows. But it seems like this rock creature could technically be called a troll of some kind. And while trolls traditionally in literature are known for being unkind, if you show them a kindness, there are some trolls who are supposedly like will return that kindness in turn. So I feel like it's still a troll, but it's an example of, hey, but if you show this kindness, sometimes it does pay back,
One thing that's interesting about this thing is like you only see it from like the chest up. It's very much like if you're a Pokemon person, like a Geodude body, but like on the ground and with a very cute face.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest, the second time you end up meeting this character, my thought was, this is a Lord of the Rings Eagles situation. Like, why isn't this dude just taking me places? Why is he making me go through all of this?
That's a good point.
So you go from this, you like clear off the stone guy. There is a moment where like you end up in a river and you think you've died, and anytime you're in this like semi-death sequence, the screen flashes white, this pink flower blooms, and then usually something has happened to save you. So like at one point you fall in the river, the screen turns white, the flower blooms, the Frog King is there to like lift you out of the water. One of the things that is like really uncomfortable in this section was the butcher scene. Would you care to characterize this one?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if there's a specific thing that you wanted to highlight other than
just the sounds, the smells, the
I was going to say, other than it's really grotesque in a lot of ways.
Yes.
I think what I love about Bramble is there are so many different types of horror that it approaches. And so, for example, the thing that you can't see, that for me is a really impactful horror trope, that if any game has something like that, gets me every time.
Sure.
I think the other thing that we see with this particular boss, because this is sort of the first big boss of the game, is this just bloody, meaty, just like
Body horror.
body horror. Yeah, that kind of comes through because the troll is a butcher and preparing food essentially for all of his troll buddies. And you are this tiny little creature trying to climb up and out of the kitchen. And the boss encounter is just, you're at a point where you are within his frame of attention and you have to figure out how to get out again without being able to really fight back because you are too tiny.
Yes, and there's a little bit of a campy moment where it's like you throw like a stone or something at his eye and he like gets upset and swings around. This is like a very video gamey mechanic in this moment. But for me, I think it was the sound of flies buzzing in that whole space that was just so unnerving.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not enough that it's bloody and gruesome. The sounds also give you this like grounding sense of reality that I very much did not want or need.
Yeah, I feel like for me, there's like less horror. Like, I think I'm less impacted by that kind of gore, I think.
Same.
And so for me, I was just like, it felt really gross. And I was like, oh, this is blah. But I think especially moving forward, as we go through the game, there are other areas that hit more of my primal fears a little bit strongly. But this was just a gross moment, honestly.
It's a grossy. It's a grossy, y'all.
But you do make your way out. As you get out, the rest of the level is you're still hiding from the trolls, trying to find your way back again to some semblance of safety. And just when you think you're hiding in the woods, you're like, oh, okay, I'm back. You're kind of back at the house that you were with, with all the gnome babies. Something happens.
No, please. You can take this one.
Well, you're hiding, and in my head, I was thinking, oh, good, I'm back home. I can, find refuge in this place, or at least to the gnome home. The trolls are out at night, and they basically just squash it and everyone in it, and you are just this child hiding behind a tree listening to the decimation of this gnome family, which is... That, for me, was what got me. More than the butcher, honestly.
Yeah, agreed. And this is right after you use the, corralling mechanic.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes, I forgot.
So you free a group of these gnome babies from a cage, and then they follow you. But it's soft directional control. So you move left, and they kind of move left. You move right, and they kind of move right.
Right.
So very soft. And you start walking, and you're like, what's that in front of me? Oh, it's a field of bear traps the size of gnome babies. And it's like, oh, I have to navigate this field if I'm going to get these gnome babies to safety.
Yeah. And it is truly like hurting real children or cats, where you're just like, none of them are really staying in a line. And you're like, children, please, listen to me. I swear to God, this is for your safety. They don't care. No. And they're all just kind of walking around doing their thing. That was just a sweaty moment for me. I hated it.
It's so sweaty. I lost one. I was so sad. And then you get to this point where you're like, oh, there's a house. All right, children, run ahead. And they do, and they run into the house, and 0.5 seconds later, a foot smashes on the house. And it's the troll is back. And it was the amount of rage to be I just saved these babies, and now you've killed these babies.
I think, okay, and I would love to highlight that feeling, and anyone listening, think about what was that first gut feeling you felt. Was it rage? Was it despair? Highlight it, tuck it away, think about it as Ule continues to go through these things, because as this game progresses, surprising no one, he will continue to go through really traumatic events. Turns out, if you're a child in a horror game, you are just very unlucky in that way. Thinking about how you feel as these events happen to him, and also seeing how the game characterizes him and how he processes or maybe doesn't process some of these things, I think is a really interesting thing to just keep an eye on as you play.
Okay, I'm gonna bifurcate my answers then. I felt rage at the game developers for making me save these babies for them to die.
Yep.
I felt despair as Ole. I think that's the right descriptive word there. Is just like, I can do no good here.
Yeah.
No good can be done.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh man. And then I think that pretty much closes out that section. I think you go through one more section of trying to hide from the trolls as you're escaping.
You're like, you are hiding from the light, which is, I think, an interesting...
Yeah, because they have a light that they're like using to scan for you, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Which this part actually took me a little bit to figure out because it was quite dark. And I just couldn't see where I was supposed to go for a little bit.
Some of us adjust their brightness settings for every game, and it says you should barely be able to see the signal. And I'm like, that's not how I like to play games. And I crank up that brightness. It's like, oh yeah, there's the symbol that I'm not supposed to really be able to see.
Yeah, no,
so
it
was fine for me.
Yeah, I ended up turning up the brightness because, I was like, I cannot see where I'm supposed to be going at all. There's like, because you're supposed to climb and then go horizontally and down.
The climbing one was tough.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that took me a minute to figure out. But as you think you're escaping, you think you're good, you get
snatched up. And it's in this moment when all hope was lost, that Elendil grabbed his father's light stone, and there's a bright flash of light.
Right.
And you get the white screen, pink flower, and the next thing that you see is the troll has been turned to stone. You're still in his grasp. You kind of wiggle out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a sec. Like, do I have some ability to fight back here?
Yeah, and I wasn't quite clear. And also, one thing that you see in the vision that's going to be important that's recurring, I guess, is you see Lillimore as well in that vision of white. That she's looking back at you. So again, we don't know if it's just reinforcing that you're looking for her. We don't know if this is a vision of some kind. She's on our mind.
And she's in that space where you saw her at the beginning of the game, where like you climb the cliff and there's like a weird little like set of ruins.
Yes. I don't think you see it, but it's kind of implied because it's like the same animation of when you saw her in the ruins and she turns around. So even though everything's sort of white around her, it's like you kind of figure that she's there. But yeah, I actually wasn't sure if it was Ule who defeated the troll somehow with the light, or if the sunrise just happened to happen at the perfect time because that's how it happened in The Hobbit, and why doesn't it happen like that in this game too?
I have a theory about this, but it's a spoiler for next week, so I'm gonna hold it. But I think I'm on the side that it's the stone.
Yeah. I haven't, again, I played this a long time ago and I'm replaying it now, so I haven't gotten to next week's section yet. So
okay.
You actually have a bit more fresh knowledge.
It's happened, everyone. Joel has just a hair more video game knowledge about the game that we're playing this month than Jenny does. She's already beat the game. She has way more knowledge than I do. But I'm going to count it as a W.
No, I was going to say you do have, because I think you played into next week's already, basically. Yep. So, yeah. So yeah, I couldn't recall and I couldn't remember. I was like, is it the stone or is it sunrise?
I think it's ambiguous, but I think something happens in the next week that for me connects a few different dots.
Oh man, I can't wait to play it. I'm very excited. But yeah, so that is where we end this week. Or I guess for folks listening, it was last week, and this week we're going to be playing. Let me bring up my playthrough guide just to make sure I say that properly. This week we will be finishing, if you're listening to this as we are playing it together in the month of October 2023, this week we're going to be finishing through the swamp confrontation. The narrator will say there was a light in the darkness, and that's where there's kind of an end to the scene. That's where we'll stop. So that's for next week. For everyone who's playing alongside us, again, you can play how you like.
Yeah, by all means.
Play the whole thing at once. Honestly, I think there's a lot of value in playing the whole thing at once. There's a great pace and momentum to the game as a
Yeah.
whole. So if you are like digging it, just play the whole thing. It's okay. But if you want to follow along, that's where we'll stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm bought in. I'm brambling.
Yeah, you're liking it?
I was born a brambling man, apparently.
Do you normally play, or do you typically enjoy horror like this, or this kind of game?
No.
Nice. Well, I feel like, I mean, we've played Dredge.
Dredge was horror-y.
Played this one.
Slay the Princess was
Slay the
horror-y.
Princess.
So like it's a genre that like I have really enjoyed, but
Yeah.
until this year, I don't know that I have ever played a horror-y game.
Yeah, that's cool. That's exciting. And I'd love to hear for folks playing along with us. Do you normally like this kind of game? Do you normally avoid horror? And this is the only reason you're playing is because you're like, I got to do it for the club. Let us know. I would love to hear it. Let us know what you're thinking of the game so far. If you would like your comments to be read in the podcast at the end or just throughout as we play, feel free to email me at jenny@geeksandgrounds.com or post it in the Discord and just mark that you're okay with it being read out loud. And that lets me know that you gave permission for this to be read out loud because I don't want to do it without permission.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be nice.
Check.
That's it for today. Joel, take us away.
If you find yourself in the woods and you've lost your stone of light, pull out your coffee beans and make sure that your roast is light.
That's how you survive in the woods, y'all.
Light roast coffee, everyone.
Light roast
That was the
coffee.
pun. I'm sorry.
All right, see y'all next time.